Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Larry, and welcome to another episode of the Paul Larry Podcast. On this episode, I'm going to discuss how you show up for yourself as well as your presence, how it affects the people around you. I have a question. This question is for you, and I'm going to tell you about my experience. Question. How is your presence? How is your presence when you enter a room? Not just a room like full of strangers. How is your presence when you enter your house, when you come home from work? How is your presence when you enter your kids' room or your wife's room? Is your presence heavy? Is it negative? Is it grouchy? Is it stressful? Or is your presence comforting? Is your presence light? Is your presence safe? Think about that for a second, because a lot of these questions, you may actually have to get the answer from the people around you. Honest answers. If your presence is not safe, it may be a little bit more difficult for you to get those honest answers. But if you really want to affect the people around you in the right way, you got to ask these questions. And you got to dig deep. Don't ask the questions seeking an answer that you want. Ask the questions seeking truth. When I walk into the room, how do I make you feel? And a lot of times you don't realize, right? Like for me, let me be transparent. I personally thought I was doing the best dad that I could be, right? If you go through my social media, you're going to see like all the fishing trips with my kids, constantly hiking and doing everything, and close-knit family, and doing everything possible to give my kids the life that I never had. Not realizing how I was showing up every single day with the effects of the PTSD and the panic disorder that I lived with my entire life. Not realizing how that affect them on a daily level. Yes, I'm doing everything, providing whatever they need. I'm buying, I'm getting, taking them to ball games, but not realizing day to day when I have panic attacks, when I'm manic from PTSD, not knowing how that affect them. And now they're anxious and they have anger issues and they have things, and it's all just learned behavior from being in my presence. And here's the thing, right? Not knowing how that affect them and thinking that I'm doing the best, it's the thing that blows the mind, because a lot of people don't realize how they affect the environment around them. And a lot of times your children don't even know how to communicate that to you because they don't know any better. But when you decide that I'm going to start showing up for myself the right way, when you decide to say, I don't know why I can't control my feelings. I don't know why I panic. I don't know why I blow up. I'm going to do better. And then it happens again. And you decide never to go in to get therapy and have someone evaluate you, then that's a problem, because you've made a decision. We make decisions on how we affect our environment, whether we do something about it or not, because not doing anything about it is a decision, and it affects the people around you. And doing something about it is also a decision, and it affects the people around you. So when I went into therapy and I start unpacking some deep stuff, and once I was diagnosed, it made so much sense. When I talked to my wife, I'm like, oh, I was diagnosed with blah, blah, blah. And she was like, oh, I'm not surprised, right? Because she's lived with me. So she already saw those things within me, and she's mentioned a few times that I should go get help. And once I start putting in the work and having months and months into therapy, things started to change. My children, their confidence started to come up. They were less anxious. They were less nervous. Our relationships got closer. They start coming to me, because what happens is how I started to show up for myself, right, started to affect the people around me and started to give them a different version. So I was always to them a dad that did his best, but who I was as a person affected them. Hear me again. Fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, listen to this. Doing my best and doing our best and being everything our children and loved ones need and needed, right, is what we do. But who we are and how we respond and our triggers affect the people around us. So two things can be true. You can be doing everything right, but who you are can be affecting people. And if you're a father and if you're a mother and within your household, you are not showing up for yourself as of who you are and for those triggers and those things that affect you, you are affecting your children. And if you don't get help, you're making a choice, like I did, right? to continue to affect them in a negative way and release them out into a world, right, where those effects on them will be their story until or unless they get help for themselves, right? But I've decided at 46 years old, I am going to be the chain breaker for the generational curses by going in and getting help and humbling myself under the professional guise of a therapist. And my particular therapy, full transparency, is EMDR, and it's treating PTSD from early childhood trauma, right? And what that has done for me personally has helped me be aware of how I show up for myself and how that affects everyone around me. So now when I'm triggered, I am not responding in a situation with the trauma from the past on top of the situation, which makes the whole thing completely overwhelming and cause me to respond in a way that is not healthy for that situation. Now I could say, if I'm triggered, I could say, okay. Let me take a break. I'm feeling overwhelmed. This extra feeling that I have, let me take this and put it away for when I go to my therapy session with my therapist. And now let me deal with the situation at hand. And then you deal with it more even keel, more calm, and you can process properly instead of reacting. Because a lot of times we react as not just as parents, but as people with the emotional intelligence of everything that hit us when we're triggered. And it could be you're reacting to a fight between your two kids, right? And you're triggered because you witness domestic abuse growing up. And now it's triggering that, and you're responding in a way that is overreacting. And that's just a small tidbit of what could possibly happen, but that's where who we are and how we react affects the people around us. So again, ask the questions. Find out, how does your presence affect the people around you? And if it's unsafe and they tell you what you want to hear, that's a deeper issue at hand, right? But if you create an environment that's safe, or try to create an environment that's safe, you can really fish out what you need from the people around you and say, okay, I see. When I come in the house, you feel stressed. When I come home, you feel anxious. When I come home, the house feel heavy. Okay, instead of taking that and manipulating it and going and feeling depressed and sad, and then everyone come back and say, oh no, you're fine, and tell you what you want to hear. Instead of doing that, how about you take full accountability and say, you know what, I can do better for you guys. I have to first do better for me. And in doing better for me, I'm sure it's going to affect you guys. And then that's how you show up for yourself. And that's how showing up for yourself affects the people around you. So like in this episode, I think it's important that I share this story because there's a lot of us, especially in my generation, right, where we did not have an example of seeing our parents get help. It is the way that it is. And especially with a certain demographic, like in mines, coming from a Caribbean background and people of color, right? We hear the saying like, oh, this generation is so soft. Everybody's into their feelings. People are running into get help and get therapy. And that's so counterproductive to true healing and breaking general cycles, because there are a lot of us out there that have seen things that we should not have seen, that have experienced things that children should have never experienced. And we're out there doing the best we can to show the world that we're stronger and we're tougher generation, right? And then we're triggered by things, and then we're acting like fools, and we're carrying on. And I'm here to say, look, man, my generation, our generation, we're going to break these generational cycles, and our children are not going to carry that. We're not going to project our fear, our anger, our anxiety, and our low self-esteem and our ego onto the next generation because our ego would not allow us to submit ourselves under a therapist and have ourselves be fully evaluated and get the help that we need. So I'm here to just share my story, to encourage and let people know, man, like I grew up in a bad neighborhood. Like I know, like this is not something we do because we're tough and, you know, we ain't grow up like that and we ain't built like that and blah, 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 blah. I'm not worried about all of that. I'm not worried about perception. You know what I'm worried about? I'm worried about my children. I'm worried about my wife. I'm worried about how could I show up and be the best version of myself for them so they can be the best version for my future grandkids. So they can be the best version for the wives or the husband that they're going to get. I want to put people out in this world that will have emotional intelligence and have awareness of things that they don't need to carry because it came from my great grandparents. It came down the bloodline of slavery. It came down through trauma. I'm not going to pass that on to them so they could continue that in my bloodline. It stops here and it stops with me. And I hope you make the decision to make it stop with you as well. Again, my name is Paul Larry. This is the Paul Larry Podcast. Thank you for watching. Please hit that subscribe button and share this with a friend, family, or loved one.